Welcome to everyone, and thank you for joining Tricycle's online practice session today. My name is Danya, and I'm the online learning manager at Tricycle. And we began these sessions in response to the global pandemic as a forum for speaking to the moment we're living in and practicing with the challenges that we're facing. So in this spirit, I'd just like to start by acknowledging what's going on now for many of us, the continued fight for racial justice that is on many of our hearts and minds at this time, as we just commemorated also Juneteenth here in the United States. So we're just continuing to host these sessions as a way of being with what's going on. So our guest today is Lama Rod Owens, an author, activist, and Lama in the Kagyu School of Tibetan Buddhism. He holds a Master of Divinity degree in Buddhist Studies from Harvard Divinity School and is a co-author of Radical Dharma, Talking Race, Love, and Liberation. His latest book, which just came out last week, in fact, is Love and Rage, The Path of Liberation Through Anger. So we're really happy to have him here today. And I'll just say for now, we're on a Zoom webinar, so everyone's audio and video are off. But we are recording the session, so anyone who's unable to tune in live can view the recordings of this and past sessions at tricycle.org/live, where you can also make a donation to support these free offerings. We will have time for some Q&A toward the end of the call today, so you can post your questions in the Q&A panel, which is there's a button for that below the video screen, and we'll get to as many of those as we can. If you are tuning in from Facebook Live, then you can also post a question in the comments, and I'll add it to the queue here in Zoom. So thank you so much to you, Lama Rod, for being with us today, and I'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to everyone who's joining in. I want to welcome you. And I bring you greetings from the ancestral and indigenous land of the Wampanoag, the Massachusetts, and the Nipmuc people here in what is now called Boston. And I am so happy to share this space with you today. I'm grateful to Tricycle for offering these teachings live and free of charge. Is really a wonderful offering to the community. And I'm just really grateful for your practice as well, the practice that you're putting in to stay well. I think regardless of where we're at in the world, I think that we're all really working hard to be well. To keep our hearts open, to keep our minds open. We're working really hard to work with all the obstacles that many of us are facing around, resources, financial resources, the obstacles around health and well-being, the obstacles that we're working with around just anger and hopelessness and rage and fatigue. And, I want to just say that I recognize that I am holding space with you as I hold space as well for my own struggle with everything that's going on. One of the really hard things for us is believing that we're alone, that we're isolated somehow. That we're the only ones in the world who is experiencing the fear and the fatigue or the overwhelm or the anger. And that belief in being alone can really actually compound the experiences of suffering, of discomfort. And one of my main practices is just stopping as much as I can throughout the day when I feel overwhelmed and saying, I am not the only one. I am not the only one experiencing this deep discomfort, this deep heartbrokenness. I use the word heartbrokenness as a general identifier to describe, just this composite experience of discomfort that I experience. And that also includes feelings of pain and aching and trauma, um, and hopelessness, fear, whatever it may be. So this is my experience of heartbrokenness. And even though this is also an umbrella term that I will continue to use throughout the teaching for this hour, I also want to define heartbrokenness in general as a deep disappointment, as a deep, profound disappointment that I am having to experience things that I did not consent to. Um, that I am experiencing things that I was born into. And I feel as if I have lacked a certain amount of agency to transform whatever this thing I've been born into is, and the suffering and the discomfort that arises from that thing. And so there's just a deep disappointment. I know that sounds very basic. I know that may sound like very, almost plain in a way, but for me, when I say disappointment, I'm really deeply connecting to this experience of, not getting what I want or having what I need, on so many different levels. And I'm able to sit with that, and I think one of the practices that is really important for us right now is to deepen our capacity to be with the brokenheartedness, right? To be with the deep disappointment and all the components of the brokenheartedness for us, you know, you know, to deepen our engagement in meditation and all the practices within meditation, including loving kindness and so forth, to really expand our capacity to hold, everything, you know. And that's really the heart of my practice, is to hold everything, both the joy and the heartbrokenness, right? To hold everything equally in my practice. It's really difficult for us to get free and experience liberation if we do not develop the capacity to hold everything. And holding everything also means, in my practice, that I am engaged in the work of loving everything. I am trying to love even what is unlovable. I am trying to love even what is unlovable. And that becomes a kind of agenda, actually, in my practice, to love everything and to love what is even unlovable. And when I talk about love in this case, and in any case, actually, when I talk about love, I am talking about acceptance. So my definition of love is a deep, non-judgmental acceptance of everything. When I accept everything, it doesn't mean that I condone everything. It doesn't mean that I celebrate everything, nor is this understanding of love personal or erotic, or about liking anything. Again, when I use love in this sense, I mean that, like, I am allowing everything to be present, including experiences of violence, including systems of violence, systems of power. When I am accepting these systems, I am doing the work of acknowledging that these systems exist in this relative world, right? In the relative plane, these systems actually exist. Patriarchy exists, racism exists, transphobia exists, ableism exists, ageism exists, particularly for those of us who are getting older. Ageism is becoming a reality for us. And so when I say that these things exist, I'm not condoning it, I'm not celebrating, I'm saying that this is actually happening. And once I begin to accept what is actually happening, then I start actually touching the ground, right? I start touching the ground of reality itself. And that's when um, I know that when I touch into the ground, I know that like I'm actually beginning to practice. You know, that's when I know I'm beginning to practice. For so many of us, we spend so much of our time not touching onto the ground, not touching the ground because we're actually very much afraid of the brokenheartedness. And as I mentioned that, I actually feel my brokenheartedness coming up. And we're going to move deeper into this in practice just soon. Touching deeper into the brokenheartedness. And so when I feel that coming up, I just allow it to rise and say, there you are. There you are. So when I start touching into the brokenheartedness, I actually start touching onto the ground, to the ground of my experience, the ground of my reality. I begin to accept, and that's where love really starts for me, because when you start doing this work of touching into the brokenheartedness and touching into the ground of reality, this is when your heart becomes tender. This is where you become open. This is where you really begin to move into the world in a new way. You begin to move into the world in a way that you're not so afraid of everything. And I know that we're afraid, and that's one of these basic human qualities, right? Is the fear. Like we're just afraid, and for good reasons often. Fear is important. Fear helps us to be safe. Fear helps us to avoid danger, right? But sometimes fear becomes really super overwhelming, and fear actually keeps us from actually doing the things that we really need to do in order to experience freedom in our practice, freedom in our lives, freedom in our relationships. Freedom, the fear keeps us from actually being with the world, and being with the world in a really direct, open, sober way. And I think often the fear is around not wanting to experience the brokenheartedness. And that's okay. I mean, I want you to know that like that's okay. Like this is hard work, And just in a few minutes, I want to just introduce you to one of my main practices that I use to do this touching into the brokenheartedness, touching into the ground, right? I know this is hard, and I want to say that I love you. And I accept you. And because I love you, I need you to do this work because I want you to be free. Because another expression of love is simply the wish for everyone to be free. And I know that in my practice, that there is no liberation without moving into the brokenheartedness, holding space for the brokenheartedness, and then coming into contact with the ground, the reality that actually begins to hold the space for the brokenheartedness. And again, I want to encourage you, anytime you feel the brokenheartedness come up, give it space. Give it time. No matter what you're doing, you can be in the middle of giving a Dharma teaching to hundreds of people, to currently 560 people. And even then, we're expressing kindness for ourselves and generosity for ourselves by allowing our brokenheartedness to have space. Not by pushing it away. I'm not trying to push it away. I'm not trying to bypass it, but I'm just allowing it. I'm taking care of it. You have to take care of it by giving it space. We take care of everything by offering it space. So let's move into our practice for this session. And we're going to be practicing, between maybe 25, probably about 25 minutes, between 20 and 25 minutes. And then we'll have space for questions afterwards, okay? And so to begin with, I really encourage you just to come into a position that feels appropriate for you, okay? And of course, the Buddha taught that, we can kind of come into a meditation, physical meditation position in different ways. We can stand up, we can walk, we can sit on a cushion, we can sit in a chair, we can lie down, but I just invite you to begin this session just by arranging, coming into a position that feels appropriate for you to sustain about 20 to 25 minutes of practice. And as we continue the practice, I really encourage you to practice discernment and to really embrace your agency. And what I mean by this is that I really want you to feel as if, you have a choice as to how you're kind of listening to the instructions that I'm offering. So if I offer certain instructions, then they don't feel appropriate for you. They don't feel as if they're really good for you to do that, then I really encourage you not to do it. No, please don't do it. If we're going to be working just a little bit with the breath, if the breath is really hard for you to be with, and for many of us struggling through complex traumas, the breath can be quite unstable. So if you can't do the breath, I just really encourage you to turn your attention to something that feels more neutral. In a space around you, or maybe within the body, or something tangible that you can use as an anchor, okay? So always take care of yourself in the practice, okay? So I won't necessarily continue to remind everyone about this sense of agency, and taking care, but just know that, as we continue. So as we continue, I invite you just to turn your attention into the space that you're currently practicing in. Just gently inviting the attention to come back into the space, come back into the room, as if our awareness is just filling up the space, the container of the room. And then I invite you to just slowly begin to turn your attention a little closer, just noticing that you have a body. We don't have to go into the body right now, but in my practice, I simply like to just say in my mind, there's a body here. And this is my body. And then I take it a step further and I say, and I am having an experience of the body. And so if you feel resourced enough, I invite you to shift your attention now to the breath, just noticing the in-breath and the out-breath. Right now, I am breathing through into my nose and out of my mouth. If you're feeling activated or super energized, I encourage you to breathe simply in and out of the nose. And I'm just allowing my breath to slow down, to deepen. I'm just elongating both the in-breath and the out-breath. You may notice that the breath begins to uncover maybe some subtle emotional energies. And even initially now, I encourage you just to allow those energies, those emotions to really rise within a kind of spaciousness. And we recreate that spaciousness by just not reacting, just by noticing, watching, and allowing this energy to rise up through into our minds. And now I encourage you to shift your attention down to your seat and just noticing the weight of your body, the sensations of your body making contact with the seat. And wonder if you can trust the seat to hold you. And I also invite you to shift your attention even lower, down into the earth. And we may be sitting on a floor that's multiple floors up from the actual physical earth. But as we shift our attention even into the floor itself is an expression of the earth. So shifting our attention down into the earth and noticing how the earth, the energy of the earth, the element of the earth can rise to touch us back. And it can feel like we're being held by the earth. And I encourage you to simply acknowledge that holding, allowing the earth to hold you. Because as the earth is holding us, the earth is also accepting us, is loving us. And I wonder even now, if there are things that we're really struggling with in terms of our brokenheartedness, our sadness, our hopelessness, our anxiety, I wonder if you can allow the earth to hold it. And in my practice, I just imagine that I'm letting go, particularly in this moment of anxiety and fear. And I'm imagining that it's just falling into the earth, the energy of these emotional states, the energy is just falling into the earth, and the earth is just holding that energy for me. And in this way, the earth becomes a source of refuge, actually becomes a foundation for us. Again, just let the earth have it. Let it go. And now I invite you to shift your attention back. Just bringing the attention just a little higher up to your heart center. And in my practice, I like to bring my palm up, if possible, um, to my heart center. This is completely optional as well. But in my practice, I bring my palm up to my heart center, and the sensation of my palm resting on my heart center really begins to feel really stabilizing and holding. So it brings up memories of people that I loved, particularly when I was younger and smaller, people that I loved who were trying to protect me. They would just put their hands on my heart center in a gesture of love and protection. And I just connect with that in this moment. And I go a step further, and I also begin to reflect on something or someone that I'm grateful for. And I invite you to engage in this practice as well, to reflect on something or something that you're grateful for. Even something that may have just happened today, or maybe something you're always grateful for. Just reflecting on it and imagining that the energy of gratitude begins to grow within the heart center. And if you're feeling able to, imagine that you're breathing in and out of the heart center. And as you breathe in, imagine that the in-breath begins to feed this energy of gratitude, like oxygen feeding a fire. And this energy of gratitude begins to grow and strengthen because of the in-breath. You begin to feel this energy of gratitude circulating through the body, through the mind as well. As this energy grows, I just like to take a few moments just to sit within this energy of gratitude. Because just like being held by the earth, I am allowing myself to be held by gratitude right now. And gratitude is also the recognition that I am only here. I only have the resources that I have because of the work of others, because of the kindness of others. There's nothing that there's nothing I can do in this life without the help of others, including the help of the earth, the land, and plants. So allowing myself to sit within this gratitude. I invite you to also explore what it feels like to even allow your gratitude to hold these aspects of the brokenheartedness as well. What is that experience like? And you can stay here just being held by the gratitude. But if you would like to join me in just a slight extension of this practice, often I love to share this energy of gratitude with others in my life, particularly with others who are also, maybe struggling with things, going through things. I just like to just imagine that this energy is being shared with them. So you can do that. I also love to imagine sharing this energy of gratitude down into the earth, thanking the earth for supporting my life. I share this energy of gratitude into my breath, thanking my breath for supporting my life. I share this energy of gratitude intentionally back into my body, and I thank my body for supporting me, for being a vessel. But you can share this energy of gratitude with anyone and anything. And the more we share, the deeper the experience of gratitude becomes. And now I'd like to move a little further into the practice. I invite you to join me, but you can stay at any point of the practice, any stage of the practice that feels as if it is tending to something that needs to be tended to. If you'd like to go further, I invite you to shift your attention into your mind. I invite you to just begin to notice thoughts and emotions. And I invite you to really notice, particularly the thoughts and emotions that are tough right now, that carry a lot of uncomfortable energy. These experiences of brokenheartedness, or however you're defining that for yourself, it can be anxiety, fear, hopelessness. Just noticing and naming those for yourself. And I invite you to imagine that the mind itself is a vast ocean, a vast sea. You can even imagine that you're actually just sitting on the beach, looking out over this vast ocean that stretches out into the horizon without limits, without boundaries, just far, far into the distance. And that is your mind, limitless, vast, deep, fluid. And I invite you to begin to imagine that your difficult thoughts and emotions are flowers. That in your mind, you're just transforming these difficult things into flowers, actually the most beautiful flowers you can possibly imagine. For me, it's roses and tulips and sunflowers and lilac and lavender. And I imagine that I take these flowers and I just kind of offer them out onto the surface, the ocean of my mind. I'm just imagining that these flowers of some of my difficult experiences in my mind, are just floating on the surface of the ocean of my mind. I'm just sitting on the beach watching these flowers float out into the ocean. I'm not trying to grab onto them because I can't. I can't wade into the water, nor am I running away from it. I'm just watching these flowers of my brokenheartedness float out onto the sea, the ocean of my mind. And I let them, in a way as if I am just offering back to my mind its own contents, its own expressions. And I let go. And just in my practice, in my mind, I'm over and over and over again, turning what is difficult into flowers and offering it back into the ocean of my mind. And as I do that, one of the things that we can experience is space, openness, tenderness. But for me, most importantly, what I experience is the space to experience my brokenheartedness, to feel it moving through my experience. And just always remembering that the earth is under us, that the seat is under us, that we have the energy of gratitude holding us as we're doing this really profound, deep, energetic work of tending to our brokenheartedness. just spending 2 more minutes with this practice before we will conclude. So we're going to prepare to transition out of the practice. And I invite you first to begin by bringing your attention back to the seat, back to the sensations of the body resting on the seat. Noticing the earth under us again. So allowing that the sensations of the body on the seat to pull our attention deeper and deeper and closer to the earth, out of the emptiness in the mind, into the body, back to the relative. And then I love to, at the end of practice, just actually go back through the support to my practice, and I actually thank the support. So I thank the earth again. I thank my seat again. I thank my breath. I thank my body. I thank my mind. I even thank my brokenheartedness for teaching me, for allowing me to experience it in the session. I thank my teachers, my guides, my mentors. I thank all beings for being a part of helping me to experience care and support. And I thank you for your practice, for your effort. So at the very end of the practice, I loved just to conclude by just taking a few deep cleansing breaths. And I do that by just breathing really deeply into my nostrils and then exhaling the air, imagining that I am exhaling air through every opening and pore of my body. Imagining that I'm just exhaling all this kind of leftover still energy. So I want to get everything moving and fluid and circulating in and out of the body. Okay, so I'm going to do 3. You can join me, but move at your own pace. Okay. And if you want, just doing a few simple movements, I love to begin by just stretching. Okay, raising arms up, stretching. shaking my hands and arms and shoulders. Doing a few twists, spinal twists. Okay, shake it off. It's always important after you really do really deep work with emotions to have energy practices like deep breathing and exhaling practices and movement practices to really just move the energy around, So we just have just about 14 minutes or so left. I would love to offer to open the space up for questions. There's a question box as well. If you would like to ask a question, just go ahead and supply that in the box itself as well. There are many different kinds of expressions of the practice or versions of the practice. And when we're working with brokenheartedness, when we're doing the offering of the flowers and so forth, you can do that as a collective offering. So sometimes I imagine that I am holding the collective heartbrokenness of the world. And I am turning all of that into flowers and offering that onto the sea of my mind. And this is, also called, I would also call this emotional labor as well. So this collective emotional labor that I'm doing for the collective is really important. We have a question here. So what would you say is the best way to bring a full feeling of compassion to experiences which are not personally your own? Yeah. I think this is, really a good practice around exchanging ourselves with others, or empathy. Empathy is a really great tool to use here, where I'm just actually turning my attention into the experiences of others. And I get into empathy by wondering, just about what someone's experiencing. And I begin to wonder what would be similar experiences for me as well. There are experiences that I don't understand, obviously, but I can say, there's maybe something similar in my experience. As I'm seeing other people experience something, there's something similar for me, and I want to connect first to that and sit within that experience of whatever that discomfort is. And that gives me a little more of an insight, a little more of a felt experience to be with others. And even if we can't actually have a sense of what someone's experiencing, we can have a sense of what we're experiencing in the moment, in terms of suffering and deep brokenheartedness. And that can be enough to say, what, I don't know what you're going through, but I understand suffering for myself. And so I'm going to sit in my discomfort as a way to sit with you, to hold space with you as you're sitting in your discomfort as well. So one last thing, I know there are lots of different questions coming up. I will just say again, just lastly that, sometimes we're just, we're afraid of connecting, empathizing, right? Empathy being the root of compassion, right? So without empathy, there's no compassion. If I can't have a sense of discomfort for myself or for others, then it's going to be really hard for me to give rise to an aspiration to be free from discomfort. I can't wish to be free from something that I'm not connecting to. So I hope that was helpful. Can I speak a little bit more about brokenheartedness? Is it the nature of being human, or our current condition, or both? I think it's both. I think that, when the Buddha speaks about, dukkha, right? So you talk about this basic discomfort, dukkha, right? I think that's how I understand brokenheartedness. It's like in dukkha, the deep connotation of dukkha is not just suffering, but it's this felt sense that things don't fit. that things aren't perfect, that things aren't coming together in a way, and there's always tension, there's always disjointedness. And so for me, brokenheartedness is experienced through that. So it's both this condition, of being human in this realm, is also the conditions that we find ourselves moving through every day, trying to navigate samsara. Let's see. It's a lot of different questions. So I'm sorry, we won't be able to get to all of them. So I'm just trying to just kind of scan through them and see if I can't combine several questions. Yes. So this is a really important question. Do you have any guidance or wisdom to offer for when panic or shortness of breath arises during practice? Thank you. That's really important. First, we have to turn our attention away from the breath. And I think we have to turn our attention into an anchor that feels much more stable, much more solid, And so when it's important for us, I think, to just kind of have a sense of what we can turn our attention into when we feel panicked, And so for me, this is why I love the earth. I want something solid under me. The weight of my body on the seat is something that I turn my attention to if I feel panicked. Actually just stopping the practice, walking away, taking a break, taking a short walk within your space, that is super helpful as well. Everything is asking for space. Everything is asking for space, is asking for agency and space. And so when I feel that panic, I just give it space. I don't push anything. I allow it. I rest my attention in something that feels solid. A betrayal has left me devastated and shattered of heart. I want not to hate the other person or my husband. I try. I feel overwhelmed. Yeah. And really, and maybe this too, but it's really so much about taking care of ourselves in the moment. And again, the theme of the time that we're living in is about cultivating space, because there's so much happening for us right now. Many of us are having very different experiences in life in terms of illness and financial stability and so forth. Or if you're a parent who's been stuck at home with your kids, that's a whole nother thing. I think Tricycle should do a whole series for parents who are having to take care of kids, and other family members right now as well. But anyhow, we have to give space, even when those feelings of hate for another person arises. Allow those feelings to arise. And I love to, when I'm experiencing that, compassion is really the practice that I go back to. I touch into my discomfort and I just allow that discomfort to be there. However that discomfort is, if it's hate, if it's woundedness, I just allow it to be there. And sometimes we have to allow the arising of hate in our experience. Of course, acting on that hate is the problem, but allowing hate to be in our experience and just watching it and giving it space is very healthy to do. Just acknowledging that and saying, what, I'm experiencing hate for this person. This person really hurt me, and just allow yourself to go there is really important. And so this next question, this is really important. I am one of the few Black people that my white friends constantly interact with. In the past few weeks, we've been having conversations where they've been expressing their guilt and desire to learn more about racism in America. I'm so excited for their journeys, but it can be exhausting to feel like I'm shouldering their burden. How do I encourage them to keep educating themselves while also protecting my own energy? This is really important question, and I've been having this conversation with many people, Black folks and people of African descent. And at this point, you really have to encourage your friends to really seek out these resources that are so available right now, these resources about race and racism and the history, particularly of America. And you have to communicate that this is difficult for you to hold as someone who is experiencing racism in this system of power. You know, that like the best thing that they can help you to do is to offer you space, and that they and point them towards the direction of other resources. There's so many amazing books, great books out right now, and many things. We're living in a time, in a media age, where we have access to a lot of information, and we just need to hop onto YouTube just to find videos and talks and lectures about these things. And you have to really encourage your friends to do that. You know, and it's important for you to say no. You know, it's important for you to say, I can't talk about this right now, but you can say, but yes, please continue to kind of seek material, to seek information, to seek education. And yeah, it's really, you have to put yourself first. You know, you have to put yourself first and protect your energy by putting up boundaries, saying no, but encouraging your white friends to continue the work through other resources. That's really important. I mean, if I have lots of resources, many of you have seen the interview that I did on 10% Happier with Dan Harris. That has been a really good resource for lots of folks. I encourage people, you know, I encourage you to go to 10% Happier, the podcast, and just share that podcast out with people, where I'm having this conversation with Dan Harris just about how do we protect our energy, how do we have difficult conversations and have boundaries at the same time around race and what's happening right now. Okay. I'm going to do one more question, and I hope to so many good questions. Okay, acceptance is not always a super happy feeling. Absolutely. I don't, it's very rare in my experience that acceptance actually feels good. So absolutely. It can feel related to sadness. Yes. Is that okay? Yes. Yes. I think that is natural. Particularly for many of us, we're not 100% in a space of deep acceptance all the time. You know, and so this is why practices like this is important. This is why I have to do this every day, multiple times a day, where I stop and say, okay, I think I'm distant from what's actually happening. Let's practice, let's breathe, let's settle. And how can and I allow myself to come into the reality of something, you know, and when I do that, I'm at the same time coming into the reality of sadness. And I take care of the sadness, and the sadness just gets lots of space. And this is a practice you continue to do over and over all the time. Okay. So thank you, everyone, for your questions, for your time. I want to just reiterate the presence of my book, Love and Rage. A lot of the practices that we went through, a lot of the components of the practices that we went through are really in the book here. Some of the practices that I offered, the flower practice is a brand new practice that I've just, you know, kind of started working with over the pandemic. But I have quite a few different practices in this book. You can buy this from your local favorite vendor, independent bookstores, online, in person. The book is currently sold out, and they will be back on the market. We're in the second printing, so this will be back on the market next week. So thank you for your patience with the book, and I hope to see you again at an online event or something.
Thank you so much to you,
Thank
Lama
you.
Rod, for sharing your practice with us today.
Thank you.
And thank you to everyone for joining and engaging with this practice today and sharing your thoughts and questions. You can review the recording of this session and the previous sessions at tricycle.org/live, where you can also check for upcoming session dates and make a donation if you'd like to support these free live stream offerings. We wish everyone health and safety, and many thanks again to you, Lama Rod.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Daniel.
Take care, everyone.